Hi, I'm Terry Kolath. I'm here today with Dick Brown of Parkwood. You may know Dick Brown of Parkwood from teaching math classes like you never took before in the academy. Math like you never ever heard of math before. Also a wonderful class on Escher recently. And a great thing he does is he keeps in touch with all of his students, and I'm lucky enough to be on that email chain, and just tells us interesting things that are happening that revolve around math. And the last one I got was about days getting longer. And I said, Dick, will you please give us a little mini class on that? And he said, sure.
Yeah, well, we all are in this happy time of the year where we can noticeably see the day-to-day changes in daylight. That's wonderful. But I've had students in the past, back where I was teaching, that thought that the day-to-day changes were the same. So, for example, they would say, from December to June, the day-to-day changes were the same, and that's sort of a linear graph, and then as we went from June back to December, the graph would look like that. But in fact, it doesn't. It follows a cosine curve, like this one right here. So along the bottom, I have the dates, December 21, January 21, and monthly all the way up to June 21. And you'll see that in late December and in January, there isn't a heck of a lot of change in the amount of daylight that you gain. You go from 0% up to maybe 6%. By the time you get to February 25th, you've gained 25% of the daylight that you're going to get between the two solstices. But now look what happens between February 21st and April 21st. You go from 25% to 50%. The graph is very, very steep there. And we will notice it particularly here in the next week as we come into the equinox. Notice the graph is steepest there, and we'll notice the greatest day-to-day change at that point. So let's take a look at what happens right here in Fort Myers. Here's a graph in Fort Myers. Now, it's not as pronounced because it's stretched out over the whole year and you don't get this big bump that you had on the last one. You do get a couple bumps, though. There's daylight saving time kicking in right there. And over here farther in the fall when we turn back the clocks. So you'll notice here we are right about now. And right after the equinox, you'll find that the sun setting, it's up here, the sun setting about 7:30 or so. That's where this light blue area is. And these other areas are the dusk and twilight. And we'll actually give photographs of what they look like so people can relate the graph to what actually they see in the sky. But you'll notice here in late June at the solstice, you go up here and you'll see the sunset is about, and you read across to the left, a little bit past 20 hours after midnight, or roughly around 8:30 or so, you'll get the sun dipping below the horizon. And up here where it's slightly darker, you'll get twilight, and that happens about an hour later, roughly around 9:30. So let's just take a look at what we're talking about here when we talk about sunset and twilight. Sunset obviously here, but it actually is measured by the precise moment that the tip of the sun dips below the horizon. And then let's take a look at, whoops, there's a twilight. I thought I had a larger photograph, but you see that this has a scientific name. It's called nautical twilight, and the sun has to be between 6 and 12 degrees below the horizon. Anyway, for Fort Myers, on the solstice, those times are roughly 8:30 for sunset and 9:30 for twilight. Now, what I'd like to do is go exactly due north to Detroit. It's due north, same longitude. And here the graph is a little bit steeper. You can't see it too much because the whole graph is stretched out over the whole year. But if you look up here in late June at the solstice and look up here at sunset and read across, you find that it's about an hour later than it is in Fort Myers. You read it across and you find it's roughly around 21 and a half hours after midnight, 21:30 as they say in the military or in Europe, or 9:30 p.m. The reading up again to dusk, you see that happens almost a whole hour later at 22:30, 10:30 at night. So Detroit, on the solstice, gets an extra hour of light in the evening, an extra hour in the morning.
Interesting.
So, up a couple hours more than we get in Fort Myers.
Whoa, which might not mean much to people, the difference or the precision with which all this is measured, but what a difference it makes for many, many things, military, astronomy, all sorts of applications that really care.
I know. I heard a story the other day about why daylight saving time is starting as early as it did. Because when I was a kid, it seemed to me it was late April. And now it's like 10th or 11th of March.
Right.
I heard it was the golf industry. Because they found that when the golfers had more daylight, they would come out to the golf courses more in March and April.
Interesting. What a lobby, huh?
I know.
Interesting. Well, how it happens is one thing, but boy, I can't wait.
I know. Let me just click this last screen here, and it just shows the times of exact sunset and twilight for the two cities, Fort Myers and Detroit. And you see roughly an hour difference in the evening.
Who would even think that unless you're talking with family or something? You're saying, "Wow, I got to get in before it gets dark," and it's like, "What? It's not even going to be dark for another hour."
I know.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
And
Yep.
thank you for sharing
Well,
it.
what a lot of people don't realize is that the sines and cosines we studied in school, they all had to do with right triangles. You remember opposite over adjacent and all those crazy rules. What we didn't learn in those days is all the beautiful things that trigonometry involves. Not just sunrises and sunsets, but the tides, AM, FM radio, electromagnetic waves. It's beautiful, and we never saw that in high school.
And now we can really think about it in our maturity and appreciate the beauty that we find in math.
Yeah.
You do that so well for us. Thank you very much.
It's
Dick
been my
Brown.
pleasure, Terry. Thank you.